Good morning. Welcome to all of you that are gathered here. Welcome to all of you that are watching online. Glad that you are with us today. Last week we started a new sermon series that we're simply calling Search. And we're looking at some of the questions that cause people to go searching for answers. Those kind of questions that nag all of us, whether we're people of faith or not people of faith. Last week we talked about, is there a God? Next week I'm going to talk about the source of knowing God. Like, is the Bible something I can trust? Is it reliable? And then the following week, I'm going to talk about the question, is Jesus really God? But today, we're going to look at the question, why does God allow pain and suffering? It's one of the big questions. Maybe it's a question you wrestled with. I know certainly it's a question that I've wrestled with in my own life. Several years ago, some of you may recall, I was having trouble with my vision. I was having trouble seeing, and I was speaking at a service here at the church, and I was having all kinds of problems trying to read the words from the Bible that night. And I thought I had faked my way through it, but I'm not sure that was the case. I'm not sure it went as unnoticed as I thought, because the next week, there was a wonderful, sweet lady in our church who came up and whispered to me and said, "Curtis, I got you this." And she handed me a Bible. And I said, "Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. You didn't have to do that." And she said, "Open it." So I opened it, and it was a giant print Bible. Apparently, I had not gone as unnoticed as I had thought. And she was taking care of me. Thank you, Chris Mosley, for that. Well, my vision continued to get worse. And it turned out that I had cataracts in the center of my pupils. So when the light was bright, my pupils would constrict, and my vision became nothing more than a dim blur. Like I would go watch a ball game outside, and this is when I was a lot younger. I would go watch a ball game, and I couldn't follow the ball in flight. Like I couldn't. If it was a really bright sunny day and somebody was talking to me outside, I could only see just a shadow. I couldn't see the details of their face. So I went to the doctor, who told me I had young cataracts. And I didn't know that was a thing, because in my mind, only my grandfather had cataracts. So I clinged still desperately to the word young. There is such a thing as young cataracts. I had young cataracts. So they said I was going to had to have surgery, cataract surgery, to remove my lenses and replace them with artificial lenses. So I asked what I thought was the obvious question, like, okay, if I get new lenses, can I get x-ray vision with that? Because that seemed logical to me. The doctor said, no, we can't do it, which is probably good. I'm not sure I would have used that superpower for any good at all. So it was probably good. They said, yeah, no, we can't do x-ray vision thing. But since my surgery, I've been able to see a lot more clearly. I still need the giant print Bible, but I can see a lot more clearly, especially at a distance, especially outside. There are times when we experience pain, when we go through suffering to such a degree that it's like cataracts on the eyes of our souls. So that all of life, everything we know about God, and everything we know about each other, everything we know about life, and everything we know about the church, just constricts, and we can only see life and God and others through the cataract of pain. Have you experienced that vision in your life? One author wrote this: pain is the only universal language spoken and understood by everyone, everywhere. Pain is something that we all go through. All of us have had our lives constrict. And there have been times when we could only see life and God and others through that cataract of suffering. C.S. Lewis said that the problem of pain is atheism's most potent weapon against the Christian faith. So it's not merely a problem, It is the problem. Of all the reasons that people reject Christianity, of all the reasons for rejecting the claims of Christ, none of them ring so frequently, so often, as the one that's embedded in this question that we're looking at today. Why does God allow pain and suffering? Haven't you ever asked that question? When I heard that my brother had been killed by a branch that had broken from a falling tree when he was 16 years of age, I asked the question. When I shared in the joy of a friend at the birth of his son, only to share in the tears with my friend when his son died 6 months later, I asked the question. When I took a mission trip to Piedras Negras in Mexico, and I saw children who were surviving by rummaging through the remains of a garbage dump that was 10 times bigger than the shacks that surrounded it, I asked the question. When I walked through the death camps at Auschwitz, and I saw a mountain that was made of empty shoes, and I realized that those are kids' shoes, that those were shoes that had once been filled by bright-eyed children who had ended up being herded through gas chambers and piled into ovens, I asked that question. I have found it hard to go through this life and not ask the question, how about you? Why does God allow pain and suffering? And I wish I could just answer it neatly for you today. I wish I could just eliminate all doubt, all dismay, all discomfort. But whether we are atheists, or whether we are agnostic, or whether we are fully devoted followers of Jesus, we have to face the reality of suffering. And in all the conversations I've had with friends who have given up on God because of this very thing, because of this question, the thing that I most want to ask them is, so what do you do with suffering? Because we all have to face it. Just because you think God is not good or not powerful because God has allowed pain and suffering in this world, and you choose to reject faith in God, you choose to reject the claims of Christianity, you still have to deal with suffering. There's still pain in this world, and you've got to reconcile that somehow. So how do you deal with the question? Because we all have to face the question. And we shouldn't be surprised, because this is one of the oldest questions in the world. We are certainly not the first people to ask questions about why good people suffer and why bad people seem to prosper. The question goes back thousands of years. Psalm chapter 13, verses 1 and 2 reads this way: How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? 3,000 years ago, the psalmist was asking that question. The Old Testament prophet Habakkuk asked the question in Habakkuk 1:13. The prophet comes before God with a raw honesty. Why are you silent, God, while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? You know, of all the people in the Old Testament, perhaps Job is as qualified to ask this question of God. He went through incredible suffering. And he asked the question of God in Job 7, verses 19 and 20. Job said, will you never look away from me or let me alone, even for an instant? If I have sinned, what have I done to you? You who see everything we do, why have you made me your target? Have I become a burden to you? The Bible allows for us to bring our raw honesty before God, to bring our question, why, God, have you allowed pain and suffering in my life? And for all of the questions about suffering, there are just as many explanations given to reconcile the suffering in the world. with a concept of a good, great God. But here's the thing, and I think you realize this. Explanations about why we suffer may help some, may help a little bit in the face of suffering, but they are not totally satisfying, are they? Why? It's because pain is very personal. Explanations tend to be very general, but suffering, that gets to our deepest level. That gets to our core. It's very personal when we ask the question, why me? Why now? And I cannot give you an explanation that will satisfy, especially if you're experiencing pain right now. Especially if you have the question on your mind and in your heart right now. Because I don't have God's mind. I don't see with God's eyes. My vision is very dim. It's very blurry. Someday, we may see with clarity. But for now, things are pretty foggy. Have you ever driven through a really dense fog? I remember driving to the Tri-Cities airport for an early morning flight. Still dark out, but when I hit Bluntville, the fog was so thick. If you've ever had to take early morning flights very often from Tri-Cities Airport, I guarantee you have run into one of those thick, foggy mornings as you went to the airport. And I thought I was going to have to stop. I could not see a few feet in front of my car. I couldn't see that stripe, that white stripe on the side of the road. I didn't even know where the edge of the road was. So I thought about pulling over, and I knew if I pulled over, I'm just going to miss my flight. But I didn't know how else that I was going to see my way to get there. And then I came upon this truck who kind of appeared out of nowhere in front of me, and I could clearly see the taillights on the truck through the fog. And apparently he had some fog lamps in front because he was traveling at a pretty deliberate pace. So I knew if I could just follow those lights, then I'll be able to get to the airport. Now, the same is true when we try to navigate through the dense fog of suffering, when it's not real clear as to why, and we can't really see our way ahead. We may not be able to make out the details of why certain things happen in our lives, but there are some key truths that can illuminate some points of light for us as we try to get through that fog of not really knowing why things are happening. And if we follow these lights, these truths, they will maybe lead us towards some helpful conclusions. So allow me to suggest just a few points of light for navigating through the heavy fog of pain and suffering in this world. Maybe you'll begin to realize that suffering looks different when seen in these lights. The first is this: suffering looks different when it is seen in the light of choice. Suffering looks different when it is seen in the light of choice, because at the very heart of Christianity, there is love. Right? For God so loved the world that God sent. But here's the thing about love that I know and you know. Love cannot be forced. Like, you cannot force somebody to love you. There is not enough power on this planet to be able to force someone to love you. Now, you can use position, and you can use intimidation. You can use things to force people to do a lot of stuff. But you cannot force love, because it has to be freely given. Love only works if there is freedom. Why is that important? It's because freedom also has a shadow side. In the same way that you're free to love, you're also free to hate. In the same way that you're free to give, you're also free to take or steal. In the same way that you have capacity for good, you also have capacity for evil. And suffering comes from the paradox that freedom creates. The existence of evil is the result of human decision. It's not part of God's original creation. Pain and suffering and evil came because people are free to choose. And we're free to listen to the voice of the serpent. And people have chosen sin. C.S. Lewis writes about it in Mere Christianity. Here's what C.S. Lewis said. If a thing is free to be good, it's also free to be bad. And free will is what has made evil possible. Why then did God give people free will? Because free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. So when God decided to create human beings, He wanted us to experience love. God was motivated by love. But this kind of a relationship, this kind of a love relationship would only be possible if we were made in such a way that we were capable of loving God of our own free will. So in order for us to experience love, God gave us free will. It's why there was a tree in the garden that we could choose to eat or not eat from. God said, don't eat from this tree. And we chose to eat. There had to be a choice. There had to be free will. It was the only way love was possible. But it's also why there is a lot of suffering, a lot of evil, a lot of pain in this world, because we have chosen. We've chosen hate over love, taking over giving. A world without free will and the evil that people choose because of it would also be a world without love. Maybe pain looks different in the light of choice. Second point of light that may help us navigate through the fog of pain and suffering. Suffering looks different in the light of time. Listen to the words of Paul in 2 Corinthians 4:17. Paul writes, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." So think of it this way. Let's say on the first day of 2022, all right, think back and imagine on the first day of 2022, you had an awful day. Like it was a terrible day. You had an emergency root canal at the dentist, and during the root canal, your anesthesia wore off, and you woke up right in the middle of it. On the way home, you crashed your car. You had no insurance. Your spouse got sick. A friend betrayed you from start to finish. It was like the title of that children's book. You know that book, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Y'all remember that book? Judith Vorst, maybe, is the author of that book. It's about a kid named Alexander, about 4 or 5 years old, who's not having a good day. The book begins this way. See if you can relate. I went to sleep with gum in my mouth, and now there's gum in my hair. When I got out of bed this morning, I tripped on the skateboard, and by mistake, I dropped my sweater in the sink while the water was running, and I could tell it was going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I think I'll move to Australia. At the end of this book, after the day just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and he continues to want to move to Australia, his mom finally helps him realize that they have bad days in Australia too. By the way, if you ever read the Australian version of this book or the New Zealand version of this book, he wants to move to Timbuktu. But apparently they have horrible, no good, very bad days in Timbuktu as well. Now, obviously, this is a kid's book. It describes kids' problems, but I think at its core, we can all relate. I mean, we have all gone through days like that where everything seemed to go wrong, where things just aren't as they should be. So let's imagine that your first day of 2022 was just like Alexander's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. But then every other day this year is just incredibly terrific, and I hope it is for you. A friend wins the lottery and gives you $100 million. You get promoted at work to your dream job. Time magazine puts your photo on its cover as the person of the year. Your marriage is like a love story in a movie. You lose some weight, your health is fabulous, and your boss sends you on a 4-month vacation. So let's say on New Year's Day 2023, someone asks you, so how was 22? How was your year? You'd probably say, oh, it was great. It was wonderful. And they'll say, but didn't you tell me that your year got off to a rough start? Oh yeah, it was a difficult day. There's no denying that. It was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. But when I look at the year as a whole, when I put everything in context, the 364 terrific days far outweigh the one very bad day. That day just sort of fades away. Maybe that's a good analogy for heaven. Maybe not. Maybe not, because I would never want to minimize the very real pain that many of you have experienced in this life. I would never minimize that pain. I would never trivialize the suffering that you have been through in this life. But in heaven, after 354,484,000 really good days, with an infinite more number of good days to come, if someone were to ask you at that point, how's your life? You'd probably instantly react by saying, it's been absolutely wonderful. Words cannot describe the joy. And they'd say, but didn't you have a pretty rough time while you lived on earth? Oh yeah, it was a painful life. There's no denying that. But when I put it in the context of eternity, those seem like light and momentary troubles that we're achieving an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. If you will, allow the words of 1 Corinthians 2:9 to just sink in deep, to just soak into your soul. In 1 Corinthians 2, Paul writes, no ear, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him. It is hard to reconcile pain in this life with a good, great God. Unless you believe, like I believe, that this life is not all that there is. That God is preparing a better life where all of that pain and suffering will be no more. The third point of light that may help us navigate through the fog of pain and suffering, that helps suffering look different, is this. Suffering looks different in the light of love. Here's what I am most deeply convicted of. Pain and suffering does not prove the absence of love. You see this every day in life, don't you? I mean, we experience this every day, all the time. A surgeon will allow pain in order to bring healing. Am I right? Does a surgeon want to inflict pain? No. But there's good on the other side. A therapist will actually focus a client on sad memories in order to bring growth. Does the therapist just want to inflict pain? No. But there's good on the other side. If you're a parent and your kid is being a noisy, selfish, irritating, whiny brat, driving you crazy, you might have to discipline. Do you want to inflict pain? No. The answer is no, you don't. I didn't know y'all need help with this little part of it. No, you don't, but there's good on the other side. When my daughter Abby was really young, we took her to the doctor for her first shot, and I will never forget how awful it was. Up until that moment, everything that we had done in her life was to protect her, to shield her, to comfort her, take care of her. She trusted us. I felt so bad when we took her to the doctor, and he got out this huge needle, and he stuck it into her tender little arm, and her eyes got really big. Tears started welling up. She started crying. She looked right at me. She didn't look at the nurse. She didn't look at the doctor. She looked right at me. How could you do this? What have you done to me? So I picked her up in my arms. I said, honey, this was Mom's idea. I would never do this to you. Christ did not come to do away with suffering. He did not come to explain it. He came to fill it with his presence and with his love. In Jesus, we meet a God who will answer our painful questions about suffering by suffering himself. Can I just tell you all, there is no other choice on this planet as far as religions go. There is no other religion in the history of this world where the God at the center of that religion came and suffered. There is no other religion, there's no other philosophy in this world like that. And yet, here's what we hear from the prophet Isaiah, a familiar messianic prophecy, who spoke of God's suffering servant hundreds of years before Jesus ever came. Isaiah 53, verses 3 through 5. He was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our own iniquities. The punishment that has brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. The cross that Jesus went to shouts that we live in an unfair world where good people, even innocent people, sometimes suffer. But even louder it declares God really is great, and God really is good, and God really does love you. Because God takes our suffering and our pain so seriously that he was willing to take it on himself. God's ultimate answer to suffering is not an explanation. It's the cross. Listen to these powerful words from Rebecca McLaughlin. She writes, "From a Christian perspective, there is not only hope for a better end, there is an intimacy now with the one whose resurrected hands still bear the scars of the nails that pinned him to his cross. Suffering is not an embarrassment to the Christian faith. It is the thread with which Christ's name is stitched into our lives." I think that's beautiful. Let me conclude with this thought. Could it be that the question, why does God allow pain and suffering, is not the best question for us to be asking? Maybe it's not the most helpful question to ask, because the question why makes it seem that if we could just find an answer that intellectually makes sense, then we could better deal with our pain and our suffering. But the truth that we all know is that pain is not something that happens to us at an intellectual level. Pain and suffering are personal problems that demand a personal response. So rather than why does God allow pain and suffering, maybe a better question would be, where is God when we are going through pain and suffering? In an attempt to answer that question, let me take you to one final verse. It's in John chapter 11, the Gospel of John chapter 11. It's only one verse. It's only 2 words. It is, in fact, the shortest verse in all of Scripture. You're familiar with it because when they said you have to memorize a verse of Scripture, this is the one that many of you chose. 2 words. But I believe that those 2 words bring more hope in the midst of suffering than anything else I could say this morning. Let me set the context. Jesus has just received word that his friend Lazarus was sick, but Jesus delayed going to see him. And by the time he arrived, Lazarus was already dead. One of Lazarus' sisters, Martha, asked the same question that many of us have asked before. Where were you, God? Why did this happen? How could you let Lazarus die? Listen to the accusation in her words in John 11:26. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She asked the question, where were you? Should have been here. This wouldn't have happened if you would have been here. And Jesus then goes out to the tomb where Lazarus is buried. And in John chapter 11, verse 35, his response to the pain and the suffering that he heard in Martha's words, that he saw in the people around him, is captured in two simple words. John 11:35, Jesus wept. Those might be the most powerful words in the entire Bible when it comes to experiencing pain in this life. Jesus wept. If you don't know, spoiler alert, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead just a few verses later. So I've often wondered, if Jesus knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead, why was he crying? That's a great question. I do not believe that Jesus was crying for them just because he saw them in pain. He was crying for them. I believe he was crying with him. He was crying with them. And I believe he cries with us too. Those two words from John 11 lets us know exactly where God is when we are suffering. God is with us. When tragedy strikes, as it will, when suffering comes, as it will, when you're wrestling with pain, as you will, you may find yourself in the middle of the fog, unable to see the road ahead, but don't lose hope. Your life may constrict, and you can only see life and God and others through the cataract of pain. You may not receive explanations for your pain, but you may just discover something better. What you may discover in the midst of pain and suffering is that God is great, and that God is good, and that God is right there with you. God is with you in your pain and suffering. That's where God is. That's the kind of God that I want to serve. A God that is with me when I need God the most. That's the kind of God I will give my life to. And that's the kind of God I believe that we have. If you want to know that God, and you want to talk to somebody about what that looks like, or if you are in the midst of the fog of pain and you can't see any way ahead and you're tempted to give up and just pull alongside the road and quit, now I'm going to invite you as we sing this song to come to that Connect Center in the back. There'll be people there ready to talk with you, pray with you, have a conversation with you about this God that is with you. To pray with you about whatever situation you find yourself in now. Please pray with me. Great God, just like I used to pray as a kid when I sat down at the table, you're good, you're great, and we thank you. Give us faith in Jesus, who did not come to explain our painful questions, but who called us to be brave because he has filled our pain with his presence. Give us a willingness to let our suffering serve the cause of becoming spiritually alive rather than morally paralyzed. Help us to not give up too soon. Help us to have confidence that you are with us when we need you the most, that you are present even in our suffering and pain, and that our suffering and pain is not proof that you have abandoned us or that you do not love us. I think it's proof that you're with us. And when I need to be reminded of that, I simply look to the cross, which I think is the best explanation that any of us could give to both why is there pain and suffering and where you are in the midst of our pain and suffering. Help us to have a sense of your presence even now. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.